Mr. Wangusi, many thanks for speaking with us. You've announced a deadline for switching off counterfeit mobile phones by September 30th this year. What is the thinking behind this?
Ideally, the counterfeit phones are causing a lot of problems in terms of operations of the networks. And secondly, they are also a health hazard to the users, because we don't know the amount of RF or radio frequency that they emit, and therefore it becomes likely that they can be a big problem to the users. But secondly, they are also being used for criminal purposes, and tracing the users of these counterfeit phones is difficult if we don't remove them from the networks.
The argument being made here is, why does the consumer have to suffer when loopholes exist that have allowed these counterfeit phones to come into the country in the first place?
First of all, the emergence of the counterfeit phones in the country has been quite recent. And of course, it takes time to discover and know the menace of these particular phones. And the CCK, after it had discovered the problems that the counterfeit phones are providing to the users and the networks in general, made an effort to find out how they can be eradicated. And also with the current increase in crime, especially using mobile phones, and the fact that we are now having e-commerce services on being carried on the mobile platforms, it became necessary that we eradicate the counterfeit phones in order for us to stabilize this platform and make it secure for the people to use them.
How many people do you estimate will be affected by this?
From the last year's statistics, we had around 2.5 million counterfeit phones. We probably would want to think that there could be still a little more, because people continue to buy.
Is the CCK working with the law enforcement, border agencies and other port authorities to make sure that counterfeit phones don't find their way into the country, because otherwise they just infiltrate the market anyway?
Yes, in trying to make sure that we have sealed all the loopholes for the entrance and usage of the counterfeit phones, we collaborated with quite a number of stakeholders. The government ministries that are relevant to this, the other government agencies like the Anti-Counterfeit Authority, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the Kenya Revenue Authority, and many others were part of the team that came up with the solution on the way forward towards removing these counterfeit phones. Even the operators were quite supportive, and they have a role to play, and they have now installed equipment they call Equipment Identification Register that would be able to help them to identify and switch off the mobile phones.
Still on telecommunications, we have mobile number portability, which allows a subscriber to change networks while keeping the number. What are the latest data in terms of how many people have done that?
Number portability is still working good for us. Of course, the number of people who are porting are still few, I think over 50,000 or so.
Also touch on 4G licenses. Already 3 mobile operators have 3G, but you've been talking about 4G licenses, and what is the progress on that?
The 4G licenses are the next licenses that we would be able to give out. We know the chipsets for the 4G are now ready in quite a number of countries. The deployment may have to wait until we vacate, the spectrum that is being used for TV broadcasting is vacated, because I think the deployment is expected in the spectrum, part of the spectrum that is being used for TV broadcasting. So once we fulfill the migration from analog to digital, now that is the time we would say we are ready to deploy the 4G.
And that leads into the digital migration schedule. Just last week, StarTimes, the Chinese digital terrestrial provider, launched in Nairobi. I believe at this point, the digital signal covers Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu. What is the progress in terms of rollout, and when will the entire country be able to pick up a digital signal?
We had been slow in moving the digital signal towards the to all parts of the country. But I'm happy that right now, at least the movement is being seen, competition is beginning to emerge. At the moment, it has been confirmed to us that the platform, even in Kisumu, is ready. And according to our license requirements, they are supposed to be able to deploy this signal in 7 major areas, which would be able to cover over 70% of the population by December this year. So I would expect that by sometimes next year, most of the country would be covered. The big challenge could be how many people would be able to access it.
Because you need a set-top box to be able to access a digital signal.
You need a set-top box to access the digital signal.
And those are still very expensive, relatively.
Well, yeah, they're still relatively expensive. The information I had as late as last week is that the ones on the market are selling at 8,500, and that is way up expensive for most of the Kenyans to afford. But of course, we hope that the more they come into the country, the cheaper it will be. Although we still feel probably the government would have chipped in more, maybe to reduce taxes more so that most of the people can be able to afford them.
In preparation for full digital migration, you've given, I believe, 100 licenses to different broadcasters. Is that correct?
Well, we have received over 100 applications, but we have not given 100 licenses, but we have given over 40 licenses, and so many of them have confirmed that they have ready content to be able to put on the platforms. I have also received information from the platform providers that they have been approached and they are negotiating with them in terms of the service level agreement so that they can start providing the content on the platforms.
Kenya set a 2012 deadline for digital migration. Obviously, we could not meet that, but when do you expect that the entire country can be able to move over before that 2015 ITU deadline?
We were still optimistic that we will migrate as soon as we can be able to. But I cannot be able to predict exactly when we can switch off, because it has more factors to it than just simply the arrival of the signal to the rest of the country. People must be able to access the signal. But we are looking around about it to make sure that we switch off analog TV broadcasting way before 2015, so that in between it can also help us to try and correct some of the issues that may arise with the digital, with the migration process.